The boardroom falls silent as David Walker rises from his leather chair, his voice cold and emotionless. Rebecca Walker, you're fired, effective immediately. Rebecca's hand instinctively moves to her stomach. David, I'm pregnant. He laughs, the sound echoing off the glass walls. Convenient timing. Security will escort you out. Their eyes lock, husband and wife, as if they were strangers. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. Rebecca Walker stood perfectly still as the board members avoided her gaze. Only Victoria Stone, sitting unnervingly close to David's chair, met her eyes with a satisfied smile. The conference room felt colder than usual, despite the summer heat pressing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. If you'll direct your attention to the presentation, Victoria said, rising gracefully and clicking her remote, the screen behind her illuminated with financial projections. As you can see, the operations department has been underperforming for the past 3 quarters. Rebecca frowned. Those aren't the numbers I submitted last week. These are the actual numbers, Victoria emphasized, glancing at David, who nodded in support. Not the ones you've been doctoring to cover your declining performance. The accusation hung in the air. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's absurd, Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. I can show you the original reports right now. We've already checked your laptop, David interjected. It found evidence that you've been manipulating data for months. He slid a folder across the polished table. The evidence is quite clear. Rebecca didn't touch the folder. She knew whatever it contained was fabricated. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus Reynolds, their largest investor, who had always respected her business acumen. Marcus, you know this isn't true. Marcus looked down, unwilling to meet her eyes. He'd known the Walkers for years, had been at their wedding. His silence spoke volumes. The board has already voted, David continued, his voice detached as if addressing a stranger rather than his wife of 8 years. Your performance has been declining, and frankly, you've been dead weight for years. The company can no longer carry you. The words struck like physical blows. Dead weight. After everything she'd built, everything she'd created, Rebecca's mind flashed to late nights coding while David networked at parties, to the initial algorithm she'd developed in their garage apartment before they even had funding. David, we need to discuss this privately, Rebecca said, her voice low. There are things the board doesn't know. There's nothing to discuss, he cut her off. Victoria has been essentially doing your job for months. The transition will be seamless. Victoria straightened, unable to hide her triumph. The board has already approved my appointment as the new chief operating officer. Rebecca felt the room tilt slightly. This wasn't just a firing, it was a coup, and it had been planned meticulously. David, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I'm pregnant. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps even fear, crossed David's face before dissolving into a dismissive laugh. Convenient timing, he said, eyebrow raised. But it doesn't change anything. The decision is final. Victoria stepped forward, hand extended. Your company access cards and laptop, please. Company policy for terminated executives. Rebecca noted how Victoria emphasized terminated, as if savoring the word. Slowly, she removed her access card from around her neck and unplugged her laptop. As she handed them over, Victoria leaned in close. He never loved you, she whispered, her perfume overwhelming. You were just useful until you weren't. The boardroom door opened, and 2 security guards entered. Men Rebecca knew by name, Carlos and Jim. They'd wished her happy birthday last month. Now they wouldn't meet her eyes. Please escort Ms. Walker out of the building, David instructed, already turning back to the board. Now, as for our next agenda item, Rebecca allowed herself to be guided toward the elevator, her mind running calculations faster than ever before. As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of the boardroom, David already laughing at something Victoria had said, the board members relaxing now that the unpleasantness was over. Carlos shifted uncomfortably beside her. I'm sorry, Ms. Walker. We're just doing our job. I understand, Carlos, she said softly. How's Maria's pregnancy going? His eyes widened in surprise that she remembered his wife's condition. Good, thank you. We find out if it's a boy or girl next week. Rebecca nodded, maintaining her composure as they crossed the lobby. Employees stared as security escorted their COO through the atrium. Some looked confused, others quickly averted their eyes. Rebecca kept her head high, her pace measured. Outside, the summer heat hit her like a wall. Carlos and Jim accompanied her to her car, standing awkwardly as she unlocked it. Again, we're really sorry, Ms. Walker, Jim said. Rebecca smiled gently. It's not your fault. Take care of yourselves. They watched as she settled into the driver's seat, closing the door with a decisive click. Only when they turned to walk back toward the building did Rebecca's composure falter. Her hands trembled as she reached for her personal phone, not the company one she'd surrendered. She scrolled to a contact, simply labeled contingency, and pressed call. A woman's voice answered immediately. Rebecca, has it happened? Rebecca watched the Apex Innovations logo gleaming in the sunlight. The company she had built from code and dreams now turned against her. "It's time," she said, her voice finding new strength. "They've made their move." 3 hours later, Rebecca sat in her personal home office, a space David rarely entered. While their main house stood in Westlake Hills, a sprawling modern showcase for entertaining clients and investors, Rebecca had maintained this small apartment near downtown. Officially, it was an investment property, but she'd kept it as her private workspace for years. Here, surrounded by her original coding notebooks and personal servers, Rebecca reviewed files on her personal laptop, the one David knew nothing about. On the screen, the original algorithm that had made Apex Innovations a billion-dollar company scrolled by, elegant in its complexity. 5 years ago, when Rebecca had developed the predictive algorithm that revolutionized supply chain management, David had been focused on raising their first serious round of funding. While he wined and dined potential investors, Rebecca had worked through nights perfecting the code. When it was ready, David had insisted on presenting it himself. "Investors respond to confidence, Becca," he'd said. "You get nervous in presentations. Let me handle this part. We're a team, remember?" She'd agreed, believing in their partnership. That was her first mistake. A notification pinged on her screen, a news alert announcing an impromptu press conference at Apex scheduled for tomorrow morning. They weren't wasting any time. Rebecca opened her personal safe, hidden behind a bookshelf, and extracted a thick folder labeled Origin Documentation. Inside were notarized records of her work, dated patent registrations, and correspondence with the patent office, all filed under her maiden name, Rebecca Chen, a safeguard she'd implemented when the first doubts about David had surfaced 2 years ago. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria. "David wants the house too. We expect you out by Friday." Rebecca ignored it, instead picking up her phone to call Marcus Reynolds directly. Despite his silence in the boardroom, Marcus was a shrewd businessman who respected evidence above all else. "Marcus Reynolds," he answered, his voice cautious. "We need to meet," Rebecca said without preamble. "Not about my termination, about something much bigger that affects your $100 million investment." Silence stretched for a moment before Marcus responded. "The Continental, private dining room, 1 hour." Rebecca ended the call and stood, catching her reflection in the window. She looked unchanged on the outside, the same dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, the same determined set to her jaw. But something fundamental had shifted inside her. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "They have no idea what they've done," she whispered to herself and her unborn child. The Continental's private dining room offered the discretion that Austin's business elite required. Marcus Reynolds was already seated when Rebecca arrived, a scotch sitting untouched before him. At 62, Marcus had the weathered look of someone who'd built and lost fortunes before finding lasting success. He'd been the first major investor to back Apex. "You're taking this surprisingly well," he observed as Rebecca sat down, declining the waiter's offer of wine with a subtle hand over her stomach, a gesture Marcus didn't miss. "I've been prepared for something like this for 18 months, Rebecca replied once they were alone. "Ever since Victoria arrived and David started changing." Marcus leaned forward. "What exactly am I here to see, Rebecca?" David presented compelling evidence. "Fabricated evidence," she interrupted, opening her leather portfolio. "But that's not why I called you here." She slid across the first document, her original patent filing for the algorithm that formed Apex's foundation. "This was filed 3 months before Apex was even incorporated," she explained. "Under my maiden name, Rebecca Chen." Marcus studied the document, his expression unchanging, though his eyes sharpened with interest. "Keep going," he said. Rebecca placed a second document beside it, the licensing agreement she'd created, allowing Apex to use her intellectual property. An agreement David had signed but clearly forgotten about or assumed was meaningless. "I created Apex's core technology before we were married," Rebecca continued. "David was focused on the business plan and fundraising, things he excels at. I handled the technology. We agreed it was a partnership." Marcus examined the licensing agreement carefully. "Why didn't you ever speak up? You let him take all the credit in every investor presentation, every media interview." Rebecca's eyes reflected a mixture of regret and resolution. "I believed in our partnership more than my ego. That was my mistake." She laid out more documents, email chains showing her explaining the technology to David, early test results, and her notebooks with the original code concepts. "But there's more," she continued, producing financial records. "These show discrepancies between the actual company performance and what's been reported to the board." Marcus's expression darkened as he reviewed the numbers. "These suggest systematic manipulation of financial reports," Rebecca finished for him. "Started around the time David brought Victoria in. The company is performing significantly worse than you've been told." Marcus set down the documents, his face grim. "The board needs to see this immediately." Rebecca's phone buzzed with a news alert. She turned the screen for Marcus to see. Apex Innovations announces emergency press conference. CEO David Walker to address company restructuring. He's moving faster than I anticipated, Rebecca said. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I can stall the press conference. No, Rebecca said firmly. Let him talk. Let them both talk. Her calm certainty gave Marcus pause. What are you planning? Rebecca gathered her documents carefully. Justice, Marcus. Nothing more, nothing less. As they prepared to leave, Marcus asked the question that had clearly been bothering him since the boardroom. The pregnancy. Is it real? Rebecca met his gaze steadily. Yes, 12 weeks. David and I had been trying for years. She paused. He was more interested in the heir to his company than in being a father. Outside, Marcus's driver held the door for them. Before Rebecca could step toward her own car, Marcus stopped her. What do you need from me right now? Rebecca considered the question carefully. Just be ready to move quickly tomorrow, and perhaps warn your fellow board members to have their lawyers present for the press conference. As Rebecca drove away, she allowed herself the first real smile since the boardroom. Phase 1 was complete, the groundwork laid. Tomorrow would bring the next stage of her carefully orchestrated response to betrayal. Dawn found Rebecca preparing methodically in her apartment. She'd slept surprisingly well, the clarity of purpose washing away the emotional turmoil of the previous day. On her television, financial news anchors speculated about the sudden press conference at Apex. Sources suggest major leadership changes at tech darling Apex Innovations, the anchor reported. The company's stock is up 2% in pre-market trading on rumors that co-founder and COO Rebecca Walker may be stepping down. Rebecca allowed herself a small, knowing smile. The stock would not be up for long. Her phone rang. Eliza Winters, her personal attorney and old college roommate. I've reviewed everything, Eliza said without preamble. Your documentation is impeccable. The patent office has confirmed your filings predate Apex's incorporation. The emergency injunctions are ready to file with one word from you. Thank you, Rebecca replied. Is Judge Hamilton available today? He's on standby. He owes me after that charity auction fiasco last year. Rebecca nodded to herself. Wait for my signal. I want to see what story they tell first. After ending the call, Rebecca dressed with particular care, choosing a structured navy dress that projected authority without drawing attention to her still-hidden pregnancy. As she fastened her grandmother's pearl earrings, she thought of the family legacy they represented, generations of strong women who had faced adversity with dignity. At precisely 9 a.m., Rebecca settled onto her couch, laptop open beside her, and turned up the volume on the television. The Apex logo filled the screen as cameras showed the company's press room. The empty podium waited, backdrop artfully arranged to highlight the company's achievements, many of which were Rebecca's work. David strode out confidently, Victoria 2 steps behind him. Rebecca noted that Victoria had chosen a dress remarkably similar to ones Rebecca often wore for press appearances, a subtle but clear message about replacement. Good morning, David began, his practiced charm on full display. Thank you for joining us on short notice. As Apex Innovations continues its trajectory of growth and innovation, we occasionally need to make difficult leadership decisions to ensure our continued success. Rebecca opened her laptop, fingers poised over the keyboard. It is with regret that I announce the departure of Rebecca Walker from her position as Chief Operating Officer, David continued, his expression a masterful blend of professional concern and personal regret. Rebecca has been instrumental in Apex's early development, but as companies evolve, leadership needs change. Rebecca typed a single word to Eliza, now. On screen, David continued his carefully constructed narrative. While we had hoped to manage this transition smoothly, recent events have necessitated immediate action. Rebecca has been experiencing personal difficulties that have affected her professional judgment. Victoria stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on David's arm, a gesture calculated to appear compassionate while suggesting intimacy. It's with great sadness that we've had to address increasingly erratic behavior, David added, his voice lowered as if sharing a difficult confidence. We've tried to handle this privately, but Rebecca's condition has made that impossible. Rebecca's eyes narrowed, the unstable woman narrative, exactly as she'd predicted. I'm pleased to announce that Victoria Stone will be stepping into the role of Chief Operating Officer, David continued, turning to smile at Victoria. Her exceptional work as my executive assistant has demonstrated her readiness for this responsibility. Victoria stepped to the microphone. I'm honored by the trust placed in me, and while these circumstances are unfortunate, I'm committed to building on the foundation Rebecca helped establish. Rebecca smiled coldly at the calculated humility. On her laptop screen, a message from Eliza appeared. Injunctions filed. Judge Hamilton signing now. On television, a reporter stood. Mr. Walker, can you elaborate on Ms. Walker's condition and erratic behavior? David adopted a pained expression. Out of respect for Rebecca, I'd prefer not to detail the specific incidents. This is a personal matter as well as professional. He was interrupted by the buzz of phones throughout the press room, journalists receiving a breaking news alert simultaneously. A reporter in the front row looked up from her phone, eyes wide. "Mr. Walker, we're receiving reports that emergency injunctions have just been filed prohibiting Apex Innovations from using proprietary algorithms and software. The filings claim these technologies are actually owned by Rebecca Chen, Ms. Walker's maiden name, and were only licensed to Apex. Can you comment?" The camera caught David's momentary freeze, the flicker of panic before he recovered. "I'm not aware of any such filings. This sounds like unfortunate confusion." Another reporter cut in. "The injunctions include documentation showing Ms. Chen patented the core technology before Apex was incorporated. Does this mean Apex has no legal right to its primary products?" The press room erupted with questions. Victoria leaned toward David, whispering urgently. His composure visibly cracked as he glanced down at his own phone, now flooding with alerts. "We'll need to review these claims before commenting further," he managed, voice tight. "This press conference is concluded. Thank you." As David and Victoria retreated from the podium amid shouted questions, Rebecca calmly sipped her tea, watching the chaos unfold exactly as she had anticipated. Her phone rang. Marcus Reynolds. "The board is in emergency session," he said without greeting. "David claims this is all fabricated revenge. His lawyer is already calling it the desperate actions of a disturbed woman." "As expected," Rebecca replied calmly. "What exactly is your endgame here, Rebecca?" She considered the question. "Truth, Marcus. Simply truth. Every lie they tell will be another nail in their coffin." After ending the call, Rebecca opened another file on her laptop. Contingency plans developed over months of quiet preparation. Phase 2 had begun precisely on schedule. By noon, Apex's stock had dropped 18% as market uncertainty about the company's right to its own technology triggered a sell-off. Rebecca watched the financial channels from her kitchen as she prepared a light lunch, mindful of her pregnancy nutrition needs. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Board members, company executives, even old college friends now working in tech journalism. She answered none of them, instead sending the same text response. "I will address all questions tomorrow." The waiting was strategic. Let David and Victoria scramble. Let them make more mistakes. A knock at her door broke her concentration. Rebecca approached cautiously, checking the security camera on her phone. To her surprise, Victoria Stone stood in the hallway, alone and looking considerably less composed than she had at the press conference. Rebecca opened the door but blocked the entrance. "This is unexpected." Victoria's perfect makeup couldn't hide her agitation. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you. Away from David. Away from everyone." "Why would I trust anything you have to say?" "Because I have information you need." Victoria's voice dropped. "And because he's betrayed us both." Against her better judgment, Rebecca stepped aside, allowing Victoria into the apartment but keeping her in the small entry hall. "5 minutes," Rebecca said coldly. Victoria glanced around, noting the space that David knew nothing about. "He doesn't know about this place, does he? Your 5 minutes are ticking away." Victoria straightened. "I want to help you." Rebecca's laugh was short and disbelieving. "After you helped him fire me? After you whispered in my ear that he never loved me? Try again." "I was wrong," Victoria said abruptly. "About everything, I thought." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "I thought David and I had something real, that once you were gone, I would get everything you had. The title, the recognition, maybe even him. And now?" Victoria opened her handbag, extracting a flash drive. "Last night, after the board meeting, I overheard David on the phone with Lawrence Chen of Global Tech." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Global Tech had been trying to acquire Apex for years. "He's planning to sell the company," Victoria continued. "The promotion to COO was temporary, just to stabilize things until the sale goes through. He was laughing about it, saying neither of us would be necessary once he cashed out." Rebecca maintained her skeptical expression. "You expect me to believe this sudden change of heart?" "I recorded the conversation," Victoria said, holding up the flash drive. "Along with other things you should hear. I wanted your position, not your humiliation." "He went too far." Rebecca made no move to take the drive. "Why would you turn on him now?" "Because I finally realized I'm just another tool to him, just like you were." Victoria's polished veneer cracked slightly. "And because what he said about your pregnancy was unforgivable." Rebecca considered Victoria carefully. This could be an elaborate trap, David sending Victoria to gather information or plant false evidence. But the fear in Victoria's eyes seemed genuine. "If this is some kind of setup, it's not," Victoria interrupted. "Test the files. Verify them however you need to. I can get more evidence if you need it." Rebecca finally took the flash drive, though she had no intention of inserting it into any of her computers without thorough security scanning. "If what you're saying is true," Rebecca said carefully, "what exactly are you hoping for here?" Victoria's answer came without hesitation. "Protection. When this all comes crashing down, I don't want to be collateral damage. I have texts and emails showing David instructed me to alter financial reports. I was following orders. Not exactly an innocent bystander. No, Victoria admitted, but not the mastermind either. I can help you bring him down completely. Rebecca studied the woman who had sought to replace her, recognizing the calculation behind the apparent contrition. Victoria was nothing if not a survivor. Here are my terms, Rebecca said finally. You continue working with David, exactly as before. You report everything to me. Every conversation, every plan, every reaction to today's events. You provide any evidence I request. In exchange, when this is over, you walk away unscathed, provided your information proves valuable and truthful. Victoria nodded quickly. I can do that. One more thing, Rebecca added, her voice hardening. If I discover you're playing both sides, the consequences will make today's stock drop look like a minor correction. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Victoria replied. After Victoria left, Rebecca weighed the flash drive in her palm, considering the unexpected development. A potential ally inside the enemy camp, useful, but dangerous. She would proceed with caution. Her phone rang again, her doctor's office. This call, she answered. Mrs. Walker, Dr. Lou here. Just calling to confirm your blood work looks excellent, and your pregnancy is progressing beautifully. Would you like to know the gender? It was detectable in your latest tests. Rebecca placed a hand protectively over her stomach, reminded of what was truly at stake beyond corporate power plays. Yes, she said softly, I would like to know. As the doctor shared the news, Rebecca smiled genuinely for the first time that day. She had even more motivation now to ensure that justice prevailed, not just for herself, but for the daughter she now knew she carried. Now, she whispered after ending the call, the real game begins. Rebecca had underestimated David's surveillance measures. Less than 3 hours after Victoria left her apartment, Rebecca's secure phone, the one only 5 people had the number for, rang with David's distinctive tone. Sending my mistress to spy for you? David's voice was eerily calm. I expected better strategy from you, Becca. Rebecca felt a chill but kept her voice steady. Hello, David. I see Victoria's loyalty was shorter-lived than anticipated. Victoria has been many things, but never disloyal. Not to me. His tone held smug satisfaction. The flash drive she gave you? Loaded with tracking software. The moment you connected it to any device, we'd have access to everything. Rather amateurish of you to trust her. Rebecca smiled to herself. She hadn't connected the drive to anything. Instead, she'd handed it off to a cybersecurity specialist who worked in a completely isolated testing environment. Interesting assumption, she replied. But then you've always underestimated me. A slight pause suggested her response wasn't what he expected. The injunctions were a cute move, David continued, his voice hardening. But my lawyers are already filing countersuits. You signed company agreements assigning all intellectual property to Apex. After the patents were already filed in my maiden name, Rebecca countered. And after the licensing agreement you signed. Did you ever actually read the documents I gave you, David? Or were you too busy charming investors and sleeping with your assistant? His sharp intake of breath indicated she'd struck a nerve. You've made a serious miscalculation, he said, voice dropping to a dangerous register. I've frozen all the accounts you could access. Your company health insurance has been terminated. The locks at our house have been changed. How long can you fight a legal battle against $1 billion company with no income? Rebecca had anticipated these moves. I'm touched by your concern for my financial well-being. Truly, this isn't a game, Rebecca. You're pregnant, supposedly. Is this really how you want to start parenthood? Homeless and blacklisted from every tech company in Austin? The threat might have worked months ago, but Rebecca had moved far beyond such concerns. I'm curious, she said, ignoring his question. When exactly did you decide I was disposable? Was it when Victoria arrived, or earlier? You disposed of yourself, David replied coldly. When you stopped being an asset and became a liability, the company needed to evolve past your limited vision. My limited vision? Rebecca laughed softly. The vision that created the algorithm you've built your entire empire on? An algorithm that's now outdated. Victoria's helped me see where Apex needs to go next. You were holding us back. Rebecca noted his use of us, confirming her suspicions about their relationship. I have a board meeting in 5 minutes, David said, his tone shifting to dismissive. Here's what's going to happen. You'll withdraw the injunctions, sign a quiet resignation letter, and take a reasonable settlement. In exchange, I won't destroy whatever reputation you have left in the industry. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure the world knows about your mental health struggles, your obsessive jealousy, and how you tried to sabotage the company out of spite. Who do you think they'll believe? The successful CEO with a track record of growth, or the unstable wife who couldn't handle being replaced, professionally and personally? The threat hung in the air, revealing the depth of David's willingness to destroy her. I'll consider your generous offer, Rebecca said, her voice betraying nothing of her thoughts. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, David stated. After that, things get very ugly, very publicly. After he hung up, Rebecca sat motionless, processing the conversation. David was showing his true nature now, the ruthlessness he'd always kept hidden beneath charm and apparent partnership. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meeting compromised. Victoria wearing wire. Be careful. Friend at Apex. Rebecca stared at the cryptic message. Someone inside Apex was looking out for her. But who? And could they be trusted? A second text arrived from her cybersecurity contact. Drive contains surveillance malware. Yaon. Fake evidence files. Would have given full access to connected systems. Professional grade. Dangerous. So Victoria had indeed been sent to trap her. Rebecca felt a cold anger replace her earlier shock. The game was escalating faster than anticipated, and the players were proving more ruthless than even she had calculated. She picked up her phone and dialed Eliza. David just called with threats, she explained to her attorney, and apparently Victoria was wearing a wire when she came to see me earlier. Did you say anything compromising? Eliza asked immediately. Nothing that can't be explained as a wronged spouse's confusion, Rebecca assured her. But I'm concerned about his next move. He's threatened to publicly attack my mental health if I don't withdraw the injunctions by morning. Classic abuser tactic, Eliza noted. Discredit the victim so no one believes them. But we expected this. Yes, Rebecca agreed. But I'm worried about accelerated timelines. A contact just messaged that David's meeting with the board right now. What if he's pushing through the global tech sale before we can stop him? He can't sell without board approval, and Marcus Reynolds will stall any vote, Eliza reminded her. More concerning is your safety. If he's desperate enough to try entrapment, what else might he do? Rebecca thought of the daughter she carried, David's daughter, though he seemed uninterested in that reality. I need to move to the contingency location, she decided, and we need to accelerate our timeline. Can you set up an emergency hearing with Judge Hamilton for first thing tomorrow? Already working on it, Eliza confirmed. And Rebecca, don't be alone tonight. David knows where your apartment is. After ending the call, Rebecca packed quickly. Essential documents, clothes, her backup laptops and drives. Everything else was replaceable. As she loaded her car in the underground garage, she felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Looking up, she caught a glimpse of movement near the garage entrance. A dark sedan pulling away too quickly. David had her under surveillance. The realization wasn't surprising, but it confirmed the danger was immediate, not theoretical. She pulled out her phone to call Marcus when a wave of dizziness hit her unexpectedly. Gripping the car door for support, Rebecca took several deep breaths as the garage seemed to spin around her. Pregnancy symptoms, she told herself. Just stress and not enough food today. But as she steadied herself and continued loading her car, a more troubling thought emerged. What if David's threats extended beyond financial and reputational damage? What if he saw her pregnancy, his child, as nothing more than another obstacle to eliminate? The thought chilled her more deeply than any of his explicit threats. Rebecca's contingency location was a small house on Lake Travis, owned through a series of LLCs that couldn't be traced back to her. She'd purchased it using proceeds from private investments David knew nothing about. Investments that had performed remarkably well thanks to the same predictive technologies she'd developed for Apex. By sunset, she had established her command center in the lake house's spare bedroom. Multiple laptops connected to secure servers, encrypted communication channels established with her growing team of allies. Marcus Reynolds had confirmed Rebecca's fears. David was indeed attempting to fast-track a sale to global tech, presenting it to the board as a necessary response to the intellectual property crisis Rebecca had created. He's claiming the company needs global tech's legal resources to fight your injunctions, Marcus explained via encrypted video call. He's offering a premium price that's tempting some board members, despite the obvious desperation of the move. How much time do we have? Rebecca asked. He's pushing for a vote tomorrow afternoon, Marcus replied. I've managed to delay it by insisting on proper due diligence, but several board members are scared by today's stock drop. They're vulnerable to his pressure. We need to move faster than planned then, Rebecca decided. Can you ensure the full board will be present for tomorrow's vote, including remote members? Marcus nodded. Already done. But Rebecca, he's painting a very damaging picture of you. Claims of erratic behavior, vindictiveness, even allegations you tried to compromise company systems after your termination. All predictable, Rebecca noted calmly. What's important is that the full board hears the truth tomorrow, directly from me. After ending the call, Rebecca contacted her expanding team, the cybersecurity specialists examining the tracking software from Victoria's flash drive, the forensic accountants building the case of financial manipulation, and the PR firm quietly standing by to manage the inevitable media storm. As midnight approached, Rebecca finally allowed herself a brief rest, settling onto the lake house's deck with a cup of herbal tea. The moonlight glittered on the lake water, the peaceful scene a stark contrast to the corporate warfare being waged. Her phone rang, an unlisted number. Cautiously, she answered. "Rebecca? It's Michael Zhao from IT." Michael had been Rebecca's first hire at Apex, the brilliant systems architect who had implemented her algorithms. "Michael," she responded carefully, "this isn't a secure line." "I know, and I can't talk long," he rushed. "I sent you that warning text about Victoria. David has the whole development team working around the clock, trying to modify the core algorithm enough to claim it's different from your patent." Rebecca wasn't surprised. "Will they succeed?" "No," Michael said firmly. "It's your code, your architecture. They're just making cosmetic changes." "But Rebecca," his voice dropped lower, "he's also ordered a server wipe of all historical development files, trying to erase evidence of your contributions." "When?" "Scheduled for 6 a.m., before markets open." Rebecca felt a surge of cold anger. David wasn't just trying to steal her company, he was attempting to erase her very existence from its history. "Thank you, Michael. Be careful." "One more thing," Michael added hastily. "Check your personal email. Special address, not the company one. I've sent you something important." After ending the call, Rebecca opened her most secure laptop and accessed an email account David knew nothing about. Michael had sent a single file, a video recording of David in the development lab late that evening, instructing the team on exactly how to modify the code and destroy evidence. "I don't care if it's technically illegal," David's voice rang clearly in the recording. "By the time anyone could prove anything, the company will be sold, and we'll all be wealthy enough to handle any consequences. Just get it done." Rebecca saved the file to multiple secure locations, one more piece of evidence for tomorrow's confrontation. As she finally prepared for bed, another wave of dizziness hit her, stronger this time, accompanied by a concerning cramp in her abdomen. Rebecca sat carefully on the edge of the bed, breathing through the discomfort. When it passed, she called her doctor's emergency line. "Dr. Liu, it's Rebecca Walker. I'm experiencing some dizziness and cramping." The doctor's voice was professionally calm but concerned. "How severe is the cramping? Any bleeding?" "No bleeding, but the cramping is getting stronger, and I've had several episodes of dizziness today. Given your situation, I'd like you to come to the hospital for monitoring," Dr. Liu advised. "Stress can significantly impact pregnancy, and from what I've seen in the news today, you're under extraordinary stress." Rebecca hesitated, considering the security implications of a hospital visit. David would certainly have people watching medical facilities. "I understand your concern about privacy given the circumstances," Dr. Liu added, seeming to read her thoughts. "I can arrange for you to come through a private entrance and use a pseudonym in our system." The cramping returned, sharper this time. Rebecca made her decision. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. The hospital corridors were eerily quiet at 2 a.m. as a nurse escorted Rebecca to a private room in the maternity ward. True to her word, Dr. Liu had arranged discreet entry and registration under the name Sarah Chen. "Your blood pressure is significantly elevated," Dr. Liu observed after completing her examination, "and you're showing early signs of dehydration. Neither is immediately dangerous, but both need addressing to protect your pregnancy." Rebecca nodded as a nurse attached an IV to deliver fluids and medication to relax her uterine muscles. "I need to be able to leave by 7 a.m., Rebecca explained. "There's a situation I have to handle personally." Dr. Liu frowned. "Medically, I'd prefer you rest here for at least 24 hours. This level of stress is dangerous for both you and your baby." "I understand, but that's not an option right now. After tomorrow, I promise I'll take better care." The doctor looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll have the nurse check your vitals hourly. If the medication stops the cramping and your blood pressure stabilizes, I'll discharge you with strict limitations. But Rebecca, your body is sending warning signals. Listen to them." After the doctor left, Rebecca settled back against the hospital pillows, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. The monitor beside her bed showed her daughter's heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. "We're going to fix this," she whispered to her unborn child, "and then we'll build something better, something honest." She closed her eyes, allowing herself a few hours of desperately needed rest before the final confrontation. Tomorrow would determine not just her future, but her daughter's legacy. The morning brought both relief and renewal. Rebecca's medical crisis had stabilized, the cramping stopped, her blood pressure lowered to acceptable levels. Dr. Liu reluctantly signed discharge papers at 6:30 a.m. with strict instructions for follow-up care. "Whatever you're doing today, promise me you'll sit when possible and stay hydrated," the doctor insisted, handing Rebecca a medical-grade water bottle. "Your pregnancy should be stable if you're careful, but I'm still concerned about your stress levels." Rebecca nodded gratefully. After today, things will be different. As she left through the hospital's private exit, Rebecca checked her phone, multiple messages confirming that her team had executed their overnight assignments precisely. Michael had successfully protected key historical files from David's ordered purge. The forensic accountants had completed their analysis of the financial manipulation. Judge Hamilton had scheduled the emergency hearing for 8 a.m. Everything was in place for the final act. At 7:45 a.m., Rebecca entered the courthouse through a side entrance, meeting Eliza in a private conference room. Her attorney looked surprised at Rebecca's hospital bracelet, still on her wrist. "You're coming straight from the hospital?" "Rebecca, minor pregnancy complication, now stabilized," Rebecca explained briefly. "Focus on the hearing. Is Judge Hamilton ready?" Eliza nodded, still looking concerned. "He's reviewed the emergency filing. Given the evidence and the time sensitivity with the potential company sale, he's inclined to grant the expanded injunctions." "And David's attorneys arrived 10 minutes ago, looking surprised and unprepared. They clearly didn't expect us to move this quickly." At precisely 8 a.m., Rebecca entered Judge Hamilton's chambers for the emergency hearing. David's corporate attorneys rose in surprise at her appearance. They had clearly expected only her legal representation. "Ms. Walker," Judge Hamilton greeted her formally, "I understand the urgency of your filing. These are serious allegations against Apex Innovations and its current leadership." Rebecca nodded respectfully. "Thank you for accommodating the emergency hearing, Your Honor." David's lead attorney stepped forward. "Your Honor, these claims are retaliatory actions from a disgruntled former executive. Ms. Walker was terminated for cause yesterday and is now attempting to damage the company out of spite." Judge Hamilton raised an eyebrow. "I've reviewed the patent filings, Mr. Benson. They predate the company's incorporation and appear properly registered to Ms. Chen, Ms. Walker's maiden name. The licensing agreement also appears legitimate and signed by Mr. Walker himself. We contest the validity of those documents," the attorney insisted. "And regardless, Ms. Walker signed employment agreements assigning all intellectual property to the company." Rebecca remained calm as Eliza presented the judge with additional documentation. "Your Honor, the employment agreements specifically excluded pre-existing intellectual property, as noted in Appendix B, which Mr. Walker himself initialed." The judge reviewed the documents carefully, then looked up at David's attorneys. "These appear to be in order. Do you have evidence contesting the timeline of development or the exclusion clause?" The attorneys exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We'll need time to prepare a full response, Your Honor." "Unfortunately, time is precisely what's at issue here," Judge Hamilton noted. "I understand Apex has scheduled a board vote today regarding a potential sale to Global Tech, a sale that would transfer rights to the disputed intellectual property." Rebecca spoke carefully. "Your Honor, we're not asking for a final ruling today, only an expanded temporary injunction preventing the sale or transfer of the disputed technology until ownership can be properly determined." Judge Hamilton considered the request, then turned to David's attorneys. "Your response?" The lead attorney straightened. "Your Honor, delaying this strategic transaction could cause irreparable harm to Apex Innovations. The stock has already dropped 18% due to Ms. Walker's initial actions. A further delay could destroy shareholder value. And transferring potentially misappropriated intellectual property could cause irreparable harm to Ms. Walker," the judge countered. "Having reviewed the evidence presented, I'm granting the expanded injunction. Apex Innovations is prohibited from selling, transferring, or otherwise disposing of the intellectual property in question until a full hearing can be conducted." Relief washed through Rebecca, though her expression remained professionally neutral. "Furthermore," Judge Hamilton continued, "given the conflicting claims of ownership and the evidence presented, I'm appointing a special master to oversee Apex operations until this matter is resolved. Neither party may make major business decisions regarding the disputed technology without court approval." As David's attorneys protested, Rebecca exchanged a quick glance with Eliza. This was an unexpected bonus. The special master would effectively neutralize David's authority until the full hearing. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca checked her phone to find multiple urgent messages from Marcus. The board meeting had been moved up. David was attempting to rush through the sale before any injunction could be enforced. "We need to get to Apex immediately," Rebecca told Eliza, already moving toward the car. "He's making his final move." The Apex Innovations headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as Rebecca's car pulled up to the private executive entrance. Her hospital bracelet remained on her wrist, a deliberate choice, a visible reminder of what David's actions had cost her. Marcus Reynolds was waiting by the private elevator, his expression grim. "David's presenting the sale as a done deal," Marcus explained as they entered the elevator. "He claims the legal issues are minor and can be handled after closing." Several board members are wavering. "Has he mentioned the expanded injunction?" Rebecca asked. "No, I don't think he knows yet." Rebecca nodded, checking her phone one last time before putting it away. "Is Victoria there?" "Front and center, backing every word David says." The elevator doors opened directly into the executive floor, where the boardroom stood behind glass walls. Through them, Rebecca could see David at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically while Victoria stood supportively behind him. Board members sat around the massive table, some looking convinced, others troubled. Rebecca took a steadying breath, one hand briefly touching her stomach in a private moment of resolve. "Ready?" Marcus asked quietly. "Since the day I wrote the first line of code," she replied. As Rebecca and Marcus entered the boardroom, the effect was immediate and dramatic. David faltered mid-sentence, his practiced confidence visibly shaken by her appearance. Victoria's eyes widened in alarm. "Rebecca," David recovered quickly, his voice shifting to concerned husband mode. "This isn't appropriate. You're clearly not well." He gestured toward her hospital bracelet. Several board members looked uncomfortable at the implication that they were stressing an unwell pregnant woman. "I'm perfectly well, David," Rebecca replied calmly, her voice carrying throughout the room. "Though I did spend the night in the hospital due to pregnancy complications caused by stress directly resulting from your actions." Before David could respond, Rebecca addressed the board directly. "Members of the board, I apologize for this unorthodox entrance, but I've just come from an emergency court hearing where Judge Hamilton has granted an expanded injunction that specifically prohibits the sale you're currently discussing." She handed copies of the court order to Marcus, who distributed them around the table. "This is absurd," David interjected, his composure cracking. "She's trying to destroy the company out of spite." Rebecca remained steady. "The court has also appointed a special master to oversee Apex operations until the ownership dispute is resolved. Any vote today to sell the company would be in direct violation of a federal court order." Board members exchanged concerned glances, legal counsel leaning in to whisper urgently to the chairman. David slammed his hand on the table. "This is a delaying tactic, nothing more. Her claims have no merit, and our attorneys will have this injunction lifted by tomorrow." "Perhaps," Rebecca acknowledged, "but Global Tech won't proceed with a transaction clouded by such significant legal uncertainty, especially when they learn about the financial irregularities." A tense silence fell over the room. "What financial irregularities?" asked Catherine Westbrook, the audit committee chair. Rebecca nodded to Marcus, who distributed another set of documents. "These reports show systematic manipulation of financial statements over the past 18 months, Rebecca explained. "Revenue has been artificially inflated, expenses hidden in subsidiary accounts, and performance metrics manipulated to present a more favorable picture than reality." David's face flushed with anger. "These are fabricated, more desperate attempts to damage the company she claims to care about. The documents speak for themselves," Rebecca continued calmly. "And I've provided the forensic accounting methodology that identified the discrepancies. Your own audit team can verify everything." Catherine Westbrook was already reviewing the documents, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "These reference internal accounts I've never seen in our reporting, because they were deliberately kept from the audit committee," Rebecca confirmed. "Mr. Reynolds has access to the complete records as a major investor who conducted his own due diligence." Marcus nodded gravely. "I've verified the discrepancies independently. They're real, and they're significant." David's confident facade was crumbling visibly. "This is a coordinated attack on the company. Rebecca was terminated for cause. She has no standing here." "About that termination," Rebecca responded, her voice cooling, "I think the board should understand exactly what happened." She placed a USB drive on the table. "This contains evidence that I created Apex's core technology before the company existed, properly patented it, and licensed it to Apex. It also contains documentation of my contributions to every major technological advancement this company has produced." David stepped toward her, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You need to leave, now." Rebecca stood her ground. "I'm not going anywhere, David. Not this time." Victoria suddenly moved forward, placing a restraining hand on David's arm. "David, maybe we should take a break and consult with legal counsel privately." The gesture was telling, Victoria attempting to prevent David from making the situation worse. But David shook off her hand roughly. "I don't need a break," he snapped. "What I need is for my unstable, vindictive ex-COO to be removed from this meeting." He gestured towards security personnel standing by the door. "Escort Miss Walker out of the building, now." The security guards hesitated, looking uncertainly between David and the board chairman. Rebecca addressed the chairman directly. "Mr. Abernathy, before you make that decision, you should know that federal investigators are currently reviewing evidence of securities fraud related to the financial misrepresentations I just outlined. As board chairman, you have specific legal responsibilities to shareholders." James Abernathy, who had been relatively quiet until now, straightened in his chair. "No one is removing anyone until we understand exactly what's happening here." He turned to David. "These allegations are extremely serious, David. We need to address them directly." David's control was visibly slipping. "This is exactly what she wants, to create chaos and doubt. The company needs this sale to move forward. Global Tech has given us a deadline. A deadline that conveniently prevents proper due diligence, Rebecca noted. Why the rush, David? What are you afraid global tech will find if they look too closely? Before David could respond, the boardroom door opened and a woman in a dark suit entered, followed by two men in similar attire. Federal Bureau of Investigation, she announced, showing identification. I'm Special Agent Keller. We have a warrant to seize specific financial records and electronic devices related to an ongoing investigation into securities fraud at Apex Innovations. The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. David stared at Rebecca with naked hatred. You called the FBI? He demanded. I provided evidence of potential federal crimes to the appropriate authorities, Rebecca corrected calmly, as any responsible corporate officer would do. David's composure finally shattered completely. He lunged toward a nearby laptop, presumably containing incriminating information. No one touches anything until our attorneys arrive, he shouted, attempting to access the computer. An FBI agent moved quickly to intervene. In the ensuing struggle, David shoved the agent aside forcefully and grabbed the laptop, attempting to delete files. Rebecca stepped forward, trying to defuse the increasingly dangerous situation. David, stop, you're only making things worse. In his rage, David swung around, the heavy laptop still in his hands. Whether intentional or accidental, it struck Rebecca squarely in the abdomen. She gasped, doubling over in pain, one hand instinctively protecting her stomach as she stumbled backward. The room froze in horror at the attack on a visibly pregnant woman. Even Victoria looked shocked. Marcus rushed to Rebecca's side, helping her to a chair as she winced in pain. The FBI agents immediately restrained David, forcing him into handcuffs as he continued to struggle. She's faking, David shouted desperately. She's always been manipulative. She's trying to destroy everything I built. Rebecca looked up at him from the chair, one hand still pressed protectively against her stomach, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Everything you built, David? That's always been your delusion. In that moment, with David restrained and Rebecca injured but unbowed, the power dynamic shifted irrevocably. Board members who had been uncertain now looked at David with open disgust. Victoria stepped forward unexpectedly. I have information relevant to your investigation, she told Agent Keller, including documentation of financial manipulations I was instructed to perform. David's eyes widened in disbelief. Victoria, what are you doing? Victoria didn't look at him, choosing the right side. Finally, as medical personnel arrived to check on Rebecca, Agent Keller approached her carefully. Miss Walker, do you need to return to the hospital? Rebecca winced as the paramedic checked her vital signs but shook her head. Not yet. There's something the board needs to see first. Despite protests from the medical staff, Rebecca insisted on addressing the board one final time. With Marcus's support, she stood carefully, facing the shocked directors. What you've witnessed today is the culmination of a deliberate campaign to erase my contributions and steal what I built, she said, her voice steady despite her pain. But it's also an opportunity for Apex Innovations to begin again with integrity. She nodded to Marcus, who distributed final copies of her proposal to the board members. This document outlines a path forward. The technology remains licensed to Apex under fair terms. I return as Chief Innovation Officer, a proper governance structure with transparent financial reporting, and a corporate culture that values contribution over credit-taking. Board members reviewed the document in silence, the stark contrast between Rebecca's composed leadership and David's violent outburst impossible to ignore. Chairman Abernathy was the first to speak. I move that we immediately suspend David Walker from all corporate duties pending investigation, and that we empower a special committee to evaluate Ms. Walker's proposal in detail. The vote was unanimous, even from board members who had been David's strongest supporters minutes earlier. As David was led away by federal agents, still shouting accusations, Rebecca finally allowed the paramedics to help her to a waiting ambulance. The pain in her abdomen had intensified, raising concerns about her pregnancy. Victoria approached hesitantly as Rebecca was being settled on the stretcher. I'm truly sorry, she said quietly. For everything. Rebecca studied the woman who had been both adversary and unwitting ally. Actions have consequences, Victoria. Remember that in whatever you do next. As the ambulance doors closed, Rebecca finally allowed herself to acknowledge the toll the confrontation had taken. She closed her eyes, focusing on the paramedics' reassurance that they would do everything possible to protect her pregnancy. The battle was won, but the most important fight, for her daughter's future, was just beginning. 3 weeks after the dramatic board meeting, Rebecca sat in her doctor's office, her heart racing as Dr. Liu moved the ultrasound wand across her abdomen. There she is, Dr. Liu said with a reassuring smile, pointing to the screen. Strong heartbeat, good size for gestational age. Your daughter is quite resilient, just like her mother. Rebecca exhaled slowly, the tension she'd been carrying finally easing. After David's attack, she'd spent 3 days in the hospital on bed rest, terrified she might lose the pregnancy. Those had been darker days than even the betrayal itself. "So everything is truly okay?" Rebecca confirmed, still watching the fluttering heartbeat on the monitor. "The placental bruising has healed nicely, and your blood pressure is finally back in normal range," Dr. Liu confirmed. "I'd still recommend reduced stress and regular rest periods, but your pregnancy appears stable. You and your daughter weathered the storm." As Rebecca left the medical building, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, board meetings, and restructuring plans, all conducted from her hospital bed initially, and then from home under doctor's orders. David remained in federal custody, denied bail due to flight risk, after investigators discovered offshore accounts and a planned exit strategy. The charges he faced were substantial: securities fraud, financial misrepresentation, assault, and attempted destruction of evidence. Victoria had indeed provided crucial testimony, receiving limited immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Rebecca's phone chimed with a message from Marcus. "Board approved the final restructuring plan. Unanimous vote. Ready when you are." She smiled, texting back. Meeting them at 2 p.m. The Apex, soon to be renamed, headquarters looked different to Rebecca as her car pulled up to the main entrance rather than the executive access she'd used before. Employees stopped to watch as she walked through the atrium, her pregnancy now visibly showing at 16 weeks. Some nodded respectfully. Others seemed uncertain how to react to her return. The boardroom where the dramatic confrontation had occurred had been redesigned, the imposing dark table replaced with a more collaborative circular arrangement, the space brighter and more open. Symbolic changes to match the substantive ones. Chairman Abernathy rose as Rebecca entered, extending his hand. "Welcome back, Rebecca. Or should I say, welcome to Walker Innovations." The board members applauded as Rebecca took her seat, not at the head of the table, but as part of the circle. The new arrangement reflected her vision for the company: collaborative leadership rather than hierarchical control. "Thank you all for your confidence," Rebecca began. "The past month has been challenging for everyone, but today marks a new beginning." She opened the presentation displayed on the room's screens, showing the rebranding and restructuring plan for what would officially become Walker Innovations the following week. "Our company was built on brilliant technology but flawed values," Rebecca continued. "Walker Innovations will stand for both technological excellence and ethical leadership." For the next hour, Rebecca outlined her vision: transparent financial reporting, collaborative innovation processes, and a corporate culture that rewarded contribution rather than competition. Most revolutionary was her proposal for industry-leading parental support policies, including on-site childcare, extended leave for all parents, and flexible work arrangements. "Some will say these policies are expensive luxuries," Rebecca acknowledged. "I say they're essential investments in our most valuable asset, our people." The board's approval was emphatic. By meeting's end, Rebecca had been officially appointed Chief Innovation Officer, a new role focused on technology development rather than day-to-day operations. The CEO position would remain vacant temporarily, managed by a committee until a suitable candidate emerged. As board members filed out, Marcus remained behind. "Quite a transformation," he observed. "From fired COO to company namesake in less than a month." Rebecca shook her head. "It was never about my name on the building, Marcus. It was about building something honest, something my daughter can be proud of." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of building, have you decided about the house?" Rebecca knew he meant the sprawling Westlake Hills mansion she had shared with David. The court had frozen most assets pending resolution of the criminal and civil cases, but had granted Rebecca exclusive use of the property given her pregnancy and the circumstances of their separation. "I'm selling it," she said decisively. "Too many shadows there. I found a place closer to the office, with a garden and good schools nearby." As Rebecca gathered her materials, a notification appeared on her tablet: David's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss settlement terms. "He's finally realizing the strength of the case against him," Marcus noted, glimpsing the message. Rebecca closed the notification without responding. There will be time for that. Today is about looking forward, not back. The following weeks brought rapid change. As Walker Innovations emerged from the ashes of Apex, the rebranding became official 6 weeks after the boardroom confrontation, marked by a modest ceremony that emphasized substance over spectacle. Rebecca had insisted there be no glorification of any individual, including herself. The company's new values statement prominently featured collaborative innovation and transparent leadership as core principles. While the legal proceedings against David continued, Rebecca focused entirely on rebuilding the company culture and stabilizing the technology pathway. The expanded engineering team, now free to acknowledge their actual contributions, flourished under the new recognition system. Michael Zhao, the IT director who had helped protect critical files during David's attempted purge, had been promoted to Chief Technology Officer. Under his leadership, the development team was both more productive and more collaborative than ever before. By Rebecca's 6th month of pregnancy, Walker Innovations had recovered much of its stock value and secured several major new contracts. Industry analysts who had initially predicted doom after the scandal now pointed to the company as a model of effective crisis management and ethical restoration. Rebecca's doctor had finally cleared her for limited travel, allowing her to meet with key clients and partners. At one such meeting in New York, she found herself unexpectedly face-to-face with Victoria Stone in the hotel lobby. Victoria looked different, the polished perfection replaced by a more authentic presentation, her expression wary as she recognized Rebecca. "I didn't know you were staying here," Victoria said carefully. "I can go elsewhere." Rebecca studied the woman who had been both instrument and victim in David's machinations. The federal prosecutor had confirmed that Victoria had provided valuable testimony, though she still faced professional consequences for her actions. "That's not necessary," Rebecca replied. "Are you working in New York now?" Victoria nodded. "A small consulting firm, entry-level position, but it's a fresh start." An awkward silence stretched between them before Victoria spoke again. "I want you to know, I'm genuinely sorry," she said, her voice lower, "not just for the professional betrayal, but for the personal one. I believed what he told me about you, that you were cold, calculating, holding him back. I never questioned why he might say those things." Rebecca considered her response carefully. "We all made choices, Victoria. Yours were wrong, but so were some of mine. I chose to let David take credit rather than insisting on recognition. I chose partnership over standing up for myself. We learn and move forward." Victoria looked surprised at the lack of continued anger. "How is your pregnancy progressing?" "Well now," Rebecca replied, one hand resting briefly on her rounded abdomen. "She's quite active, especially during board meetings." A ghost of a smile crossed Victoria's face. "She'll be a force to be reckoned with, I imagine." "That's the plan," Rebecca confirmed. As they parted, Rebecca felt an unexpected sense of closure. One more chapter of the painful past completed. At 7 months pregnant, Rebecca stood on the podium at the New York Stock Exchange, the ceremonial bell in front of her. Walker Innovations was being relisted after completing its restructuring and rebranding, a symbol of corporate resurrection that had captured the business world's attention. Beside her stood Marcus Reynolds and the newly appointed CEO, Janet Kimura, formerly of Microsoft, selected for both her technical brilliance and her commitment to ethical leadership. With 10 seconds until the opening bell, we're joined by Rebecca Walker, founder and chief innovation officer of Walker Innovations. The NYSE official announced. Walker Innovations rose from corporate scandal to become a model of transparent leadership and technological innovation. As Rebecca rang the bell, cameras flashed and the trading floor erupted in applause. The company's stock opened 15% above its projected price, a vote of market confidence in the new leadership and direction. Later that evening, Rebecca sat in her hotel suite, watching financial news coverage of the day's events. A special report caught her attention, the fall of David Walker, inside the Apex scandal. The screen showed David in prison overalls, being led into a courtroom for his ongoing trial. He looked diminished somehow, the charismatic confidence replaced by a bitter anger that aged his features. Rebecca felt no satisfaction at the image, only a complex mixture of emotions, regret for what might have been, relief that justice was proceeding, and determination to create something better from the wreckage of their partnership. She turned off the television and instead opened the nursery design plans for her new home. This, not David's fate, was her focus now, creating a safe, loving environment for her daughter's arrival. At exactly 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Rebecca's water broke 2 weeks earlier than her due date. Her carefully arranged birthing plan activated smoothly. Her driver appeared within minutes. Her doctor was notified, and the hospital's private entrance was ready when she arrived. What Rebecca hadn't planned was the welcoming committee that formed in the hospital waiting room over the next hours. Marcus arrived first, followed by Janet Kimura and Michael Zhao. Board members appeared with flowers and well wishes. Even Catherine Westbrook, once David's strongest supporter on the board, came to offer her support. After 8 hours of labor, Rebecca Walker gave birth to Eliza Chen Walker, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with a strong cry and her mother's determined expression. When the nurse asked if she wanted visitors, Rebecca surprised herself by agreeing. She had expected to want privacy, but something about the day called for community, for witnessing this new beginning together. Marcus entered first, his usually stoic expression softening at the sight of Rebecca holding her daughter. "She's perfect," he said simply. "She is," Rebecca agreed, then added with a smile, "and already showing signs of good judgment." She waited to arrive until after the Westcorp contract was signed. One by one, the small group of visitors who had become Rebecca's unexpected support system came to welcome Eliza. They represented something Rebecca hadn't anticipated in her meticulous planning, a corporate family formed through crisis and redemption. Janet Kimura was the last to visit, staying only briefly but making a characteristic straight-to-business observation. The market responded positively to the birth announcement, she reported. Stock up another 3%. Apparently, investors like the symbolism of new beginnings. Rebecca laughed, her first genuine, unreserved laugh in many months. Always the CEO. Janet's expression softened. Take all the time you need, Rebecca. The company is stable. Your work has made that possible. After everyone left, Rebecca cradled Eliza close, watching her daughter's peaceful sleep. The past year had been a journey she could never have anticipated, from betrayal to rebirth, from loss to creation. David's trial would conclude in the coming months. The legal ownership of patents and intellectual property would be formally resolved. The company would continue evolving beyond its troubled origins. But in this quiet moment with her daughter, Rebecca found herself focused entirely on the future rather than the past. 3 months later, Rebecca adjusted Eliza's carrier carefully beside her chair in the Walker Innovations boardroom. The baby gurgled contentedly, wide eyes taking in the colorful abstract paintings that had replaced the stern portraits of corporate leaders. The company's first post-restructuring quarterly earnings report had exceeded all projections. The implementation of Rebecca's parental support programs had attracted top talent from competitors. And most significantly, the corporate culture had transformed, collaborative innovation replacing competitive credit seeking. The numbers speak for themselves, Janet Kimura concluded her presentation to the board. But perhaps more telling are the qualitative measures. Employee satisfaction up 47%, voluntary turnover down 62%, innovation submissions increased by 84%. Rebecca listened with satisfaction, occasionally glancing at Eliza, who had become the unofficial mascot of board meetings. The on-site childcare center, Eliza's first, had opened last week, already at capacity with a waiting list forming. As the meeting concluded, Chairman Abernathy raised one final agenda item, the settlement offer from David Walker's attorneys, he noted. They're proposing to relinquish all claims to company ownership in exchange for dropping certain civil charges. Rebecca had expected this, with his criminal conviction now secured. 8 years for securities fraud and related charges. David was maneuvering to salvage what he could financially. The legal team recommends acceptance, Janet added. It provides clean closure without prolonged litigation. Rebecca considered the proposal, looking down at Eliza, who had fallen asleep during the financial projections. Accept it, she decided. The company needs to focus on building, not fighting past battles. As board members gathered their materials, Rebecca remained seated, waiting until they had filed out before carefully lifting Eliza's carrier. The baby stirred but didn't wake, one tiny hand escaping the blanket. Michael Zhao paused at the door. Coming to the development team's presentation this afternoon, they've made a breakthrough on the algorithm expansion. Wouldn't miss it, Rebecca assured him. Eliza particularly enjoys the code visualizations. I think we have a future engineer. Michael smiled at the sleeping infant. Like mother, like daughter. As Rebecca walked through the headquarters that now bore her name, employees no longer stared uncertainly. Instead, they smiled, some stopping to admire Eliza or inquire about the childcare center. In her office, designed with a comfortable seating area that accommodated infant care alongside technical work, Rebecca settled Eliza in the custom-designed bassinet before turning to her computer. A notification indicated that David's settlement acceptance had been formally filed with the court. With that final legal tie severed, Rebecca felt an unexpected sense of completion. David Walker would serve his sentence and eventually be released, but their professional and personal connections were now conclusively ended. She turned to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline with Eliza sleeping peacefully beside her desk. The view reminded her of standing in that first small office years ago, explaining her algorithm to an excited David, both of them dreaming of building something significant. They had indeed built something significant, just not what either had originally envisioned. Rebecca had lost a husband and partner, but gained a daughter and a company, truly reflective of her values. Later that afternoon, as Rebecca presented the quarterly innovation roadmap to the executive team with Eliza contentedly watching from her carrier, a board member leaned over to Marcus. Remarkable transformation, he observed quietly, from near collapse to industry leader in less than a year. Marcus glanced at Rebecca, composed, brilliant, and now unabashedly bringing her whole self to leadership, then at the engaged, collaborative team around the table. The most valuable lesson from all of this, Marcus replied, is one David Walker learned too late. Never underestimate what a woman will do to protect what's hers. On the presentation screen, Rebecca unveiled the company's expanded mission statement, prominently featuring their new guiding principle, Truth builds stronger foundations than deception ever could. Eliza gurgled her apparent approval, tiny hands reaching toward the future her mother was creating, one built on authenticity, resilience, and the power of beginning again. If you found yourself invested in Rebecca's journey from betrayal to triumph, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, justice, and unexpected comebacks. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our new releases. Share your thoughts in the comments. What was the most satisfying moment in Rebecca's journey? Thank you for watching. Remember, your greatest power may be the one others don't see coming.